some reason, Mani told the story about the song Baba Bhagavan, that the Andhra group, when Baba was lying in his crypt during the 7 days, the Andhra group started singing this song, and it just caught on, and they sort of sang it for days. And
I think we're going to start. We're just tiny tad late, but that's the way things are. Baba loved promptitude. But some of us don't share that love. First person that's going to perform is Gill Alvarado, and he's going to do a song that he did at Darshan, right? Yeah, he was one of those brave, brave, brave souls. I was too chicken to play at Darshan. I really was. I was just too chicken. Okay, Gillen, you can tell a little bit more about the song if you would.
You were 16, right?
I was 22. So this song came about quite by surprise. First I was involved in doing a comedy thing that I'll talk about that later this afternoon. But anyway, after that, we were talking, and somebody said, somehow Hey Jude came up, and somebody said, yeah, you know, it would be great if there was just some way to do the ending for Baba. And I said, oh, I did that. I'd only been with Baba, 6 weeks, but somehow it had come to me. So here's the thing. At the end of this, the words are complicated, but you all have to do it, okay? Wholeheartedly. And here's the words. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. You think you can do that?
I don't know. So there's two Babas. Let's make that clear.
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Okay,
we can do it.
But you got to sing it wholeheartedly. That's going to make it, all right? Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Hey Lord, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. The minute you let him sing in your heart, then you start to make it Remember, now let him sing in your heart, and you start to make it better. Hey love, don't let him down. He has called you, so go right to him. Forever, now let him sing in your heart, then you start to make it better. So hear his call and come on in. May love begin to feel the love he's giving to you. For he has told you he is you. Hey love, you're cool, but only because he and we are one. Hey love, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Remember, now let him sing in your heart, and you start to make it better, 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 better. Avatar, Meher Baba, Meher Baba, Ki Jai. Louder. Avatar, Meher Baba, Meher Baba, Ki Jai. Avatar, Meher Baba, Jai Baba, Meher Baba, Ki Jai. Avatar, Meher Baba, Meher Baba, Ki Jai. Baba, 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 Baba. Avatar, Meher Baba, Meher Baba, Ki Jai.
And Giles is going to do something. I'm not sure what, but I'll bet she'll tell you what it's going to be.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba. Oh.
And hey, hasn't this woman put together something really quite good?
Well, but I can't do that. Okay. The 1969 Darshan is the Pentecost of our time, according to Wikipedia.
Wow.
The Christian holiday of Pentecost commemorates the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles and other followers of Jesus Christ. New Testament Acts 2, that's the name of the Bible passage, relates that the disciples of Jesus were all together in one place, and suddenly there was a rushing, mighty wind. It filled the house where they were sitting. They were filled with the Holy Ghost and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Peter gave a sermon saying that Pentecost marked the start of the Messianic age. About 120 followers of Christ were present, including 12 apostles, Jesus' mother Mary, other female disciples, and his brothers. Jesus had brothers. Peter stated that this event was the beginning of a continual outpouring that would be available to all believers from that point on, Jews and Gentiles alike. So, Baba's presence, his Holy Spirit, was felt by people at the 1969 Darshan. Baba's circle included 120 disciples, plus Mira and other women disciples. And throughout the various meetings, many languages were indeed spoken. It was the start of a continual outpouring of Baba's love.
Funny is first. It's called summer school. And when I was living in Myrtle Beach, I was teaching school along with Anne and some others in the last year of segregation and the first year of integration. And it was behind the inland waterway back in the woods. And the first year I was in an all-black school. token integration of the faculty, 1 for 1. And the second year was when everyone got integrated, faculty and students. But I'm going to read you what happened in between 1 and 2. Summer school. I had been teaching on a temporary license, and the state required that I take the National Teachers Exam and 1 additional class over the summer. The class being offered at Coastal Carolina was teaching health in the elementary school. I signed up. The first day I realized it was going to be a slow and ridiculous 6 weeks. The instructor was a large, red-faced football coach who I surmised was making a little extra cash by teaching whatever the college needed taught, regardless of his credentials. He drawled his useless words through each session, and if I ever learned one single thing, it was never to take a class at Coastal Carolina again. One morning, we got into a discussion about religion. I don't remember how we got started. It wasn't part of the curriculum, certainly. Bubba, as I came to think of him, asked each of us about our religious affiliations. One by one, the members of the class proudly chimed in. First Baptist, Conway. First Methodist, North Myrtle Beach. First Baptist, Anor, up and down the rows. Then it was over to me. Uh-oh, I thought. I knew I couldn't tell this group that I was a follower of Mayor Baba, a spiritual master from India who said he was the Christ come again. Half of them probably already believed the rumors that flew around the Grand Strand about the Meher Baba Center in those days. Some thought it was a nudist colony. Others heard it was a witches' coven.
Oh, shit.
Once, years later, a small Pentecostal church in the area actually considered surrounding the center with Christians linked arm in arm to cast out the devils there. Eastern mysticism, I cautiously offered. The room suddenly was completely still, and many eyes were on me. My dear girl, old Redface began, you had better go home and read your Bible, he drawled, and save yourself from damnation. That was what really happened. I was shocked beyond belief. I looked down at the empty page of my notebook. I let nothing of the absurdity of that moment show on my face. Inwardly, I replied, yes, Mayor Baba is God in human form, you ridiculous piece of shit. If you knew what you were talking about, you would fall weeping to your knees and beg forgiveness. But outwardly, I said nothing. I managed to pass the course and also the NTE, which was a general knowledge test geared toward middle-class white America. It had nothing to do with the skills necessary to teach, and nothing to do with the culture I had entered into. I'll do one more. I could do rage therapy and Baba, or what I learned from Adi.
Oh,
Adi. What I learned from Adi. Adi, one of Baba's earliest disciples and his secretary for many years, came to the West with Baba in the 50s, and again later with others to share Baba's message. In 1977, he traveled with Jack Small, an American then living in India and serving as Adi's assistant. Adi went from city to city speaking about his beloved master. One of his stops was Denver, and from him I learned one of the most important lessons of my life. Shortly before Adi's arrival, my younger brother Johnny had committed suicide after 10 years being in and out of hospitals, Christian halfway houses, and occasional colleges. I was devastated by his death, so much so that I could hardly function. I almost lost my job. For several weeks, every time I returned to work, I stepped into the hospital's pediatric unit where I worked and would break into uncontrollable sobs that sent me quickly back home. Nevertheless, I accepted a task during Adi's visit that I thought I could manage. I would be a hostess of sorts, introducing Adi to people who had scheduled individual interviews with him. I would see to Adi's needs, bring him hot water to drink or another pillow or whatever he might request. I would let each person know when his or her time had ended and usher in the next person. The day arrived. Adi and Jack were met at the airport and taken to the home of their hosts, Dixon and Elaine Staples. The afternoon was reserved for the travelers to rest, and the first talk would take place that evening. About 4 p.m, I was just sitting down to tea and wondering if I'd ever get back to normal when the phone rang. "Hello, Winnie, this is Jack Small. Elaine suggested I call you about this. I just wanted to ask you something." "Okay." "I'd like to know about 2 people in the group here, Alan and Charlie. Are they really Baba lovers?" I took immediate offense, feeling his query was arrogant and inappropriate. "Why are you asking, Jack?" I snapped. "Well," he said, "I have some strands of Baba's hair to give to Baba lovers. But I don't want to give them to just anybody. Elaine doesn't know them, but she said you did." I bristled at his manner. I asked him, "Well, what's your criteria, Jack?" "I mean, how do you decide who's a real Baba lover and who isn't?" He was silent for a minute. Then he said, "Well, no drugs, no other masters, and no sex outside of marriage." I felt a lifetime of resentment from years of my parents' fundamentalist Christianity well up in my throat. I had never met Jack, but already I didn't like him even a little bit. In hindsight, I know that Jack was only playing his part in the drama Baba was setting up, and I became fond of him over the years, but at the time, and in the state I was in, he enraged me. "Oh," I snorted. "And who came up with those criteria, Jack? What makes those the standard?" I guess it was Mara," he replied. Well, Jack, I sneered. "I'm glad I got my strands of Baba's hair just for loving him." I hung up the phone, satisfied that I had put Mr. Small in his place. That night, Adi gave his first talk. It was all about no drugs, no other masters, and no sex outside of marriage. I was aghast. I could only conclude that Jack had gone to Adi about our conversation, and his talk was aimed directly at me. Of course, this was the talk that Adi was giving all over the United States, but I didn't know this at that time, and I was very much on edge, being in acute grief. After talking for some time, Adi opened up the meeting to questions and discussion. He asked that we be candid and say what was really on our minds. A few questions came and went, all of them superficial and irrelevant in my estimation. Then I raised my hand. Adi, none of us does drugs anymore, and none of us has any interest in other masters. But sex, that's the big bugaboo. It's culturally so different here. Why do you place so much emphasis on this? I felt I was speaking for many in our group who were single. And it was the 70s when anything goes was the tone of the day. And Adi sounded so moralistic it made me want to puke. I thought I'd gotten away from all that judgmental stuff when it came to Baba. Because, Adi replied, the sanskaras are so dense, so heavy in sex outside of marriage. It's not a question of good or bad. It's much more difficult to loosen those bindings. I hardly heard him because of thinking just how I would say what I was going to say next. But Adi, I feel that in my internal connection with Baba, I have so much other work to do first, like becoming emotionally healthy and learning to function in the world. That puts the sex thing way low on my priorities. And I felt like internally Baba was saying to me, do these things first. And I thought to myself, Adi just doesn't understand the culture here. I wanted him to grasp my meaning. Then Adi stated, with some conviction, so many people say they have an internal connection with Baba, but it's usually the ego speaking and veiled through 7 veils of ignorance. His words pierced me to the core. I was stunned. Was he calling into question my interconnection with Baba? How could he say this? How could he think this is my ego? He continued to speak, but I couldn't hear anything. I jumped up from my chair and left the room. I wandered outside. I paced the sidewalk. The evening was chilly, but that wasn't why I was shaking. My shoulders, my knees, my joints all seemed to be made of jello. My stomach tightened and I thought I might even throw up. I went back inside, standing at the door this time. I listened for something that could help me calm down, something that would let me know I was okay, but I couldn't hear the words. They were a jumble that didn't make any sense. I left again, this time in my car. All the way home I sobbed. My mind raced. How could he say that? If I can't trust my internal link to Baba, I have nothing to hold on to, nothing to keep me together. I was still shaking when I got out of the car. I got to the front door. Which key is it? I was really losing it now. I was muddled and confused. Once inside, I cried, a sea of rage and bitterness and fear. The next several hours blurred together. I'm losing my mind, I thought. Nothing makes any sense. If I can't trust my Baba, I have no center. I have no anchor, no core, no grounding. But without Baba, it doesn't even matter if I lose my mind or even my life. It doesn't even matter if I lose my soul. I spiraled down into complete darkness, a place I'd never been before. I was utterly lost. I sobbed, I screamed, I curled into a fetal position on my bed. I hugged myself, rocked myself, clung to myself in complete madness. I got up and took a photo of Baba off my wall, looking at him. Looking at him, I said aloud, "Okay, Baba, this is it. This is the acid test. If you are who you say you are, you have to help me now." because if you don't, I'm dead, gone, done for, and it won't even matter. As I said the words, I noticed the clock. It was 2 a.m. Before I knew what was happening, I lay down on the bed, holding Baba's photo to my heart. I fell sound asleep. It couldn't have taken more than 15 or 20 seconds. Everything in me relaxed. I slept peacefully for 4 hours. When I awoke, I was still holding the photo close. I felt amazingly refreshed. I showered, dressed, had a quick piece of toast and mug of tea, and headed out the door for Dixon and Elaine's. I was to be on duty beginning at 8 o'clock. I was composed, even cheerful, and ready to play my part. You need to go. Okay. Can I do?
Well, yeah, we've got a lot of people wanting to do.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said you had some openings. Okay.
Oh, no, we want
We want to hear the
Don't
rest of
stop
this.
now. I mean, absolutely, finish what, yeah.
I'm sorry. I was to be on duty beginning at 8. I was composed, even cheerful, and ready to play my part. The first person arrived. I ushered him in, made introductions, and left. When his time was up, I showed him out and brought Adi a cup of hot water. I was ready for the next person, who was late. Adi waited. I waited. The woman was a no-show. I hadn't scheduled myself for any individual time. But since the slot was now open, I went in and sat in front of Adi, so close our knees almost touched. I burst into a torrent of tears again, as all my thoughts and emotions poured out in a barrage, as if a dam had burst, flooding the universe. I found myself shouting at him, "Look what you've done to me. Do you realize? Can you see what you've done?" Adi interjected, "But didn't you hear me say right after that? There are those who have..." No, I couldn't hear anything after that. I was shattered. And Adi took my hand and kissed it. He stroked my cheek. He wiped my tears. Then he spoke. "Your only mistake was to listen to me." For the second time in less than 24 hours, I was stunned by his words. "But Adi, 50 years with Baba? You were so close to him. How can you say I shouldn't listen to you?" "You don't understand," he continued. "You must not listen to me, nor any of us, Mandali. Don't even listen to the words Baba himself has given. Listen only to the Baba within, and nothing else, no one else. Do you see?" I was quiet for a little. As light dawned, I let out a big sigh. No matter what, listen only to Baba within. I nodded. Adi caressed my cheek again. The time was up. The next person arrived. I ushered him in.
I got to the center the first time about a week after Baba dropped the body, and I met just a handful of people because there was only Kitty and Elizabeth and Jim Meyer and Edith Bradbury, so I didn't know many Baba lovers, so I didn't have any idea what a unique collection of individuals this Baba community is. But a few months later, I was there at the Darshan, and on the first day of the Darshan, after the program in the morning, we were all led, I guess by Mara, I suppose, to line up and bow down at Baba's chair, the empty chair there. And I was thinking, this is kind of unusual to bow down to a chair. And the person who was in front of me in line was a guy that I didn't know. But when he got to Baba's chair, instead of bowing down politely like everybody else had done, he slapped his hands together, said, "Oh, Baba!" And he threw himself down full length in front of the chair. And that was Tom Rogers.
Oh, yeah.
And so in the next few months, I came back to the center and I saw Tom, and I heard Tom sing this song many times. And this song is a comment on the nature of illusion, how we're caught up in illusion and how Baba comes to bring us out of the illusion. Said Baba long ago, I come, yet I go. I come to lift my babies out of jail. And Herr Baba, he only comes to lift his babies out of jail. He's a dreamer and a dream, they're one and the same. He will wake up if you only call his name. That Herr Baba, he only comes to lift his babies out of jail. He's the keeper of each heart, he's the one who turns the key. He thunders in his silence, someone goes free. That Herr Baba, he only comes to lift his babies out of jail. He's the winter when it snows, he's the tenderness of spring. Flowers in full bloom and the little bird that sings. That Herr Baba, he only comes to lift his babies out of jail. Said Baba long ago, I come, yet I go. I come to lift my babies out of jail. And Herr Baba, he only comes to lift his babies out of jail. And Herr Baba, he only comes to lift his babies out of jail.
I heard this song, Oh God Beautiful, on Kathy Riley's CD that I was also involved with. And I fell in love with it, Oh God Beautiful. And I think that Rick and Perry Flynn originally did this arrangement, but then Jeff and Kathy sang it on the album. Is Kathy here?
Paramount Yogananda wrote it.
Okay, yes.
And his version is very different.
Right.
And very simple.
And I wasn't aware of that other version when I learned it, but anyway, I've always loved it, so.
And since every line is sung twice, then you have no excuse not to sing along on the second line because you've already heard it.
Okay.
Yes, it's a sing-along.
Yes. Right.
At your feet we do bow.
kind of not such a great thing to tell jokes in the middle of all this seriousness. And some beautiful songs here and everything.
Sounds like a Baba gathering.
But I'll do my serious stuff later today when I talk about my Darshan experiences. But anyway, you know, when you tell jokes, sometimes it's not exactly a true story, so don't take all this literally. But so my wife and I were sitting in our living room, you know, several months ago, you know, watching TV, and I thought I heard like some kind of a noise in the garage. And so, you know, we both went over to, I said something to her, and then we both went over to the garage door and we looked out, took a little peek, and there was like two guys in the garage, and they were like throwing tools and things into a bag, and they were obviously robbing our house, you know, stealing stuff out of the garage. And I'm like, oh, uh-oh, you know, that could be like hundreds of dollars worth of tools being stolen, or maybe even thousands if they got the right stuff. And so I quietly closed the door and went and got the phone. I dialed 911 and I said, we got a problem here. There's like two guys in their garage that are stealing our stuff right now. We need you to send a cop car over right away. And the 911 operator said, I'm sorry, all the police vehicles are tied up right now. We can't send one over there. We'll try to get one there in a few minutes, but you know, we just don't have any cars to send. And so I hung up, and then I watched my watch, and I waited about 25 or 30 seconds, and then I called back and I said, hi, I'm the same guy that called a little while ago about the two guys in my garage stealing stuff, and you know, it's no big emergency now. You don't really have to send a police car. I just shot both of them. And so within about 3 minutes or 4 minutes, there were like 4 police cars, a SWAT team, and a helicopter overhead. They caught the guys red-handed, needless to say. But then the county sheriff came up to me and he said, Dr. Bullock, I thought you said you shot these guys and I don't see any injuries on them. And so I looked around and look at the helicopter and I look at all these cars and I say, I thought you said there weren't any cars available.
True story. Good on you.
No. I said when you tell a joke you have to understand it's not always a true story.
That's a good one. It's a
I have another one if you want.
Yes.
Okay, so I have this thing with cops apparently. So I live in Lawrence, Kansas, and I'm driving down my highway, you know, I-70. You know, I'm a taxpayer, it's my highway, right?
Yeah.
You know, it says 75 miles an hour, but you know, that's for tourists. You know, I was probably doing my usual 110 miles an hour or something, you know. And this cop has the nerve to turn on his lights and siren and pull me over. I was like, who the hell is this guy? Doesn't he know me? This is my highway. So he makes me pull over, and I'm sitting there, okay. Apparently he's a new cop or something. I got to teach him a lesson here. So he comes over and he says, let me see your license and registration. And I said, you know, registration for the car. And I said, well, that might be in the purse of the woman that's in the trunk of my car. And he said, what? He said, open your glove compartment. I said, I don't think you want me to do that. I've got a loaded 45 in there. He was like, what? And he pulls his gun out. And he says, let me see what's in the trunk. And I was like, well, I don't think you want to see the body that's in there, do you really? And so he's like, call for assistance, you know, back up, and, you know. So that's how I met the SWAT team for the second time. And, you know, they've got my car surrounded, and there's like all these AR-15s pointing at me, and then the sheriff comes up, and it's kind of like, haven't I met you before? I said, yeah, how you doing? And he says, can I see your license and registration? And I said, sure, and leaned over the glove compartment, and all these guns are going click. So I went very carefully, opened the glove compartment and handed him my license and registration. And he said, what happened to the gun? I said, what gun? He said, well, you told the officer that you had a loaded 45 in your glove compartment. I said, what? Are you kidding me? I didn't say that. And then he said, how about opening your trunk for me? So, I get down and I open the trunk and there's nothing in the trunk. And he goes, what happened to the body in the trunk? What body in the trunk? What are you talking about? And he says, the officer that stopped you said you had a body in the trunk. I said, what? I'll bet that liar told you I was speeding, too. Thank you.
Oh, now we have a very special story by a very special person who is probably the one and only person in this room who met Meher Baba. And that would be you. Did anybody else meet Baba? I don't think so. Anyway, so Tom Riley is going to tell one of my favorite stories. It's something that happened in Woodstock, where Tom is from and where I used to be from.
I'm going to begin. This has something very important to do with theology, although I'm just a small boy. I'm a small boy of 6 or 7 years old. And we're living, I'd say, 7 miles outside of Woodstock, New York. And it's an Irish community. It was formed at the time of the Great Famine, 1847, 48, something like that. And everyone living in this community is a Roman Catholic. And up on it's a beautiful little valley. It's called Sawkill. And the focus and the center of the community on a hillside, a little knoll against the mountain, is the Catholic Church. And Sunday was the prominent, the important day of the week. Mass on Sunday morning, but not for Tom. Let's see. No, it didn't in any way serve me. The ritual, the robes, the Latin, everything connected with the structure of that whole happening turned me away. But I couldn't feign illness all the time. It's very strange. Doctor, he's ill every Sunday morning. No. So I would have to go. But what intrigued me and focused me as a little guy were the words of Jesus read by the priest. Every Mass, at one specific moment, the priest would read from the New Testament. And when Jesus said that he would return again, he would come back again, I fastened on to that. And that was so meaningful to me, and I knew inside I would meet him. Oh, God. I kept it to myself. So, okay, now time passes, and praise Allah, we moved into the heart of Woodstock. And oh, I encountered so many wonderful friends, the children of artists from all over the world, all over Europe, even from the Orient. Here they were, centered in this marvelous, wonderful. So now I'm in high school. I'm in my senior year. And the principal of the school calls all the boys together in the auditorium. Something important, a message has to be given to them. The following morning, buses will take all of us to the capital city of Albany from Kingston, New York, about 50 miles away, for a pre-induction physical examination because of the Korean War. So in the morning, all of us in the buses head off for Albany. And we arrive at a giant, huge medical complex. It's immense. Some buses from various other towns and cities. Here we are converging in this huge parking lot, and there ahead of us are several big oak doors with windows that go into this immense room. And as soon as we get into the room, someone comes before us and tells us to remove absolutely every piece of clothing. Everything has to be taken off, and the room is filled with nurses and student nurses, all female. Everything has to go. No, everything. But we are handed a paper bag with handles, and that, praise Allah, is very helpful. Not entirely. Let's see what happens. It's a bit traumatic. That's why. So okay, we begin the process of the various examinations for all parts of the body, and this takes, a couple of hours. And this accomplished, here I am now in front of a desk, and there's a major there. And he's looking over the results of all the various exams that have taken place. And he says, he's looking them all over, and he says, well, Tom, you seem to be in quite good physical condition. Yeah, everything seems to be positive and looks wonderful. But let me ask you something, Tom. How do you feel about going into the Army? Could you tell me just how you feel about that? And my older brother, had been in the Second World War, and he and his friends were anti-war. And I had fallen under this, but also I was convinced that Jesus wouldn't want me to kill or wound anyone or injure anyone. So I said, I don't like the idea of going into the Army. I know that Jesus wouldn't want me to go in. Is that so, Tom? So you feel that there's no valid or meaningful reason for you to... I said, that's right, I don't. And he talks some more, he's questioning me about that, but I'm adamantly against it. So he says, one more question, Tom. Have you seen the psychiatrist? I said, no, I haven't. Well, you go up there, you see where those boys are on the second level over there, and those two big oak doors, and the boys are lining up there. You get on that line and you see Dr. Shapiro, he's the psychiatrist. So I said, fine. So I went up, and there I was, and all the other boys are waiting. And I am situated now behind, completely naked, all of us. I'm just behind an extremely overweight boy with a hiney this Okay, so it's his turn. He goes in. He goes in, and the door is open a little bit, and I'm waiting. I'm about 15 feet away, and I hear them, somebody's talking and he's answering. And let's see, I hear no. Then I hear another no. And so I say, oh my God, this is bad. So the boy comes out and he's all depressed looking and he walks away, and then I'm, all right, Tom, you go in. So I go in and make sure the door is closed. And there's an oak armchair, and I go over and the psychiatrist is at his desk and he's working on some papers, looking things over. He doesn't even look at me. And I sit in the oak chair and it's moist. And
All right, Tom.
So, okay, he looks up and he says, talk to me, Tom, about the reasons why you don't want to go into the army. And I begin to talk him about the conversations I've had with Jesus, and it would be wrong to kill and to wound and to injure people. And I go into that, and Jesus said this, and then he said that, and this. I see. You have conversations with Jesus. I said, yes, I do, often. And I'm guided in so many ways by what he tells me, because I feel I'm so preoccupied with him. I feel I want to do what he tells me is the right thing. I see. He's right. Now, one more question, Tom. Do you by any chance, and tell me this, do you speak Aramaic or Hebrew? I said, no. Well, how do you know what Jesus is saying? I just know because it comes into my mind and I know exactly what he means and what he says. I see, and he's right. Many more questions about this. And finally he says, well,
You say you know you're going to meet Jesus. You say you know you're going to meet Jesus.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yes, I see. So you understand everything he says.
You say you know you're going to meet him. Yeah.
Yeah, in other words, Tom, you will actually...
No, you just say to him.
Yeah, I know that I will meet him. Oh, you will meet him. He's wondering, where will you meet him? Oh, let's see. Writing the whole thing down. Well, Tom, I'll tell you, you check with your draft board in 10 days or so, and you'll see where you stand with the draft. That's it. So 10 days go by, and I go into the city of Kingston to...
You got your clothes back, right?
No, I forgot. It developed a terrible habit.
You said you met me at a nudist colony, the mayor's.
That's where Kathy and I met. We met at the Avalanche nudist colony outside of Woodstock.
Is that a true story?
You do know that Tom is Irish, don't you?
Okay, so you'll go to your draft board. In 10 days, go to your...
Oh yeah, so I went to the draft board. There's a big counter and the fellow behind me, oh, just a minute, Tom. And he goes over to a filing cabinet. Oh, here it is. They're not going to be calling you, Tom. He hands me the little card and it says, schizoid personality. And then under it, very heavily underlined, severe. I never heard from him again. But I must tell you, I had two very close boyhood friends that I'd known since I was a smaller child. One was a Hungarian boy who had come with his mother. His father had been killed, I think it was by the Russians in Hungary, and they came to America. He was, well, killed, and the other one, Peter Brinkman, also shot in the head. I mean, it was, so it was, Baba didn't want me to.
Thank God.
Yeah.
He wanted you to be
Well,
here
we're glad
now.
you're here.
How many of you have ever listened to the East-West Gathering album that we did in Chicago?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a song, we originally did it as a live performance. We did it here, and originally in Chicago, and then we did it, a smaller group did it here, but in Chicago we did literally every word in Francis's book with David's songs. And David Mayaki is my oldest friend in Baba. I met him before I came to Baba in 1965. We were fraternity brothers at Northwestern University. And I was really drawn to him. I mean, he's so funny and his musicality and everything like that, just great. And so a year after Darshan, I told him about Baba, and he just, I never heard this, but I read this recently. Baba just grabbed him right away. I didn't know that. I just told him about Baba, and Baba just completely grabbed him. And then we were having meetings in 1971 at an apartment in Evanston, Illinois, which I shared with Victor Seckler and Philip Leckendorf. And we would have these meetings. And someone had given David a copy of the East-West Gathering book by Francis Brabazon, and had mentioned to him all those songs in there, which Francis had originally composed to folk tunes, but they were like, as we later found, like Rainey says, Francis didn't really care about what tunes you sang his songs to, his poetry to. He would call it, put it to tune. I don't care, you just put it to tune, just whatever tune you want. So every, whatever night we met on, Monday night or whatever it was, David would have a new song. And I happened to have my room, one wall of my room was a piano. That's because a musician had lived there before, and they just put some boards up, and that was my room. It had been a dining room with a piano. So, but there wasn't room in the room for people to come into the room. So we would go down the hall, and David would play this old out-of-tune piano, because there's no way to tune it. It was really old out-of-tune piano, and sing, and we would listen to the hall. We would be taken by every song. It just, they were so beautiful. And then it came time, by the end of the year, he had composed basically the whole thing, and we had performed it several times and everything like that. We got Francis's permission to record it. And then it was done down here, and Fred Ella and Darwin and the older Baba lovers, who weren't quite into the rock folk stuff that most of our music was in those days, on both coasts and everything like that. But they heard David's music, and they really responded to it. And I remember Fred Winterfeld told me, he said it was all there. The whole East-West Gathering was in that. He said, I felt every bit. I felt Baba's, he said, Fred would talk, I felt Baba's embrace. Everything was there. Now, I'm not a singer, so David gave me a song for our performances that he said I could do like Rex Harrison. Now, I know my baby boomers in here, we all know who Rex Harrison was. I would be cautious saying this to millennials. Yeah, Rex Harrison was known for talk songs. But he wanted me to do the last line of each verse as catch the tune. And David has worked with me on music, and actually David has perfect pitch, and I was traveling down here once just before with Dot and David and Cookie, who was also the singer on the East-West Gathering album. They realized that I sang in thirds and perfect thirds. And so I always thought I was on. And I was in harmony all the time. So anyway, and David would go like that. And we even did that this past, he always likes me to sing with him, but anyway, whatever. In fact, he sent this to me so I could try to get it on. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. But this is what just like at the East-West Gathering, just like our Darshan, there was the sightseeing day. And also, of course, the Samadhi Day, which I guess we'll all talk about, the major days. And so the Australians had it on a different day than the Americans because of something about the boat or something like that. But everybody got to do that. And there's a little bit in this song, so this is a song about that. There's some Australian slang in it. Gink means a look, and deco is from the Hindi. Deco means a look, so that's a look. And so here it goes. I have not performed it in 48 years, but here we go. We took them out for many a mile, for a gink and a deco at the bob of places. You should have seen their happy faces, though we took them by bus, regular tourist style, and many by now were caught cases. To where God-man was born, where he went to school and coaxed and thrashed, learning stubborn mule, led the other boys in their games and sports, was judge and counsel and law and torts, an example in chivalrous deeds, words and thoughts. Took him to the spot where God Babajan had kissed his brow and in a moment's span had given him God's self, which stayed alone he desired, and he beat his head on a stone as the five held him from escape from man. Took them across the plains unfertile with a gink and a deco only once a mile to Meherazad, where Baba now lives and Mara keeps her hard-kept garden, and Kakabaria is its warden. Here beloved Baba stays in seclusion and plays out the end game with illusion, and sometimes bathes lepers and feeds the poor, though as Jesus said there are always more, and suffers his great humiliation. Then to Sarosh for lunch, then to Meherabad, where Padri caretakes, and he does it hard, where Baba founded his great ashram that set the pattern for the world to come, and the face of Maya considerably marred.
I'm always last or first. I've noticed that. Well, Francis Brabazon once wrote me a letter that was a poem. It was May of 1970, May 7th of 1970. So I'd written him a letter a little while before, I guess it's spring, so it was just a year after Darshan. And at Darshan, I remember writing the mandala, you know, when Mani asked us to write on those pink papers and leave something, how I'd learned to know Baba as a human, his humanness through them. And, you know, I'd always known him as God. Of course he was God. I knew it from the moment I heard about him. You know, it was like the sun rose. But so I don't know what I was complaining about, but I must have been complaining about something to Francis that he gave me this response. I think I've been up all night writing a paper because I looked out on the Midway, which is from the University of Chicago. From my apartment, I could see this swath of green. It was the Midway from, what was it called, the exposition back in, when Vivekananda was there. But Mayor Baba had visited there between trains on one of his trips in the 30s. Is that right, Alice? He's our historian. He remembers everything. And the robins were singing. And I think I told Francis that they were braver than I was, you know, in facing whatever life's challenges I was facing at the time. So he responded, "Do not sigh for the beloved of the old days. Let your sighs fan the flame of your this moment praise. Let zeros cancel zeros. Even the robins have brought you heartening news of battles being bravely fought. Don't let anyone tell you that we're not all in the same boat. Those that saw him were seeing no more than a beautiful coat. His physical presence was his challenge to us. Here I am, now find me. But even when I am found, nothing but the rope of my name can bind me. Whether one saw him or not, he is still knocking on each heart door. And each heart is still harboring strangers. What matters some few, some more? Chuck out the want, strangers, and make your house his comfortable home. And remember, he's hungry, but will eat only name honeycomb."
Oh, sweet.
If the beautiful beloved were not here, where, oh, where could he be?
There is not a drop which does not contain ocean's oceanity. J-Pop.